Letitia and Stefan. We said that we would name this series because pretty much it's the best way for an introvert to sit in a car and drive while the extrovert talks. But today this episode talks further into our relationship. So if you haven't seen the last episode, we were talking about how we met, and it's pretty interesting because we met in high school. Been together for coming up on 12 years now. A lot of people can relate to, but they probably don't want to talk about much, is when your parents do not approve of your relationship. We're very lucky where only my side of the family didn't approve of the relationship, so at least we had somewhere to go and people to talk to. But I know people where both sides of the families did not approve of the relationship, so in a way we are very lucky. Half lucky, yeah. Out of all of my boyfriends, my parents never liked a single one of them. With one of my guy friends, my dad thought that I was dating him, and when he thought that I was dating him, he treated him like garbage, and then when he finally realized that we weren't dating, they were like best of friends. So it's a tough issue with, especially with Asian immigrant parents. And then mixed on top of that, this is my first serious interracial relationship, and my parents had met him once when we were doing a school project together, so that I told them it was Stefan, and my mom immediately was like, oh no, like you can't date him, what is he? And I was like, well, he's half white, half Guyanese. And she's like, Guyanese, and made comments. And then from there I got very defensive because I was like, here we go again, here we go. Parents haven't even really talked to him, haven't really got to know him, and they're already judging. And then when I talked to my dad about it, my dad was like, well, he's a mechanic and you're gonna go into fashion, so because your careers are so different, it's not gonna work out. You guys are just too different. I tried before with my previous boyfriends to like bring him into the circle, get my parents to meet him and talk to him, and maybe they'll warm up to him, right? It doesn't work for me. It hasn't worked for me, so then I ended up just sneaking around, lying to my parents a lot, which is not right. And then eventually his parents started asking questions, and then they found out that my parents didn't like him. I think they were pretty understanding.
I don't know how to put it. They're like, they couldn't comprehend why.
Yes.
Why a parent wouldn't want to meet me, because in my family it's always like,
bring them around.
Yeah, like if you have somebody that you care about, then bring them here, and then not to like interrogate. It's never. No, it was. It's always just, you know, if you're good enough for a son, then come over. And if you're not good enough to bring them home, then you shouldn't be with them anyways. Smart. It really made me sad when you're like, I kept asking you, I'm like, let me just talk to your parents, let me talk to them. And you were like, no, they don't want to talk to you. So we're just gonna hide everything. Like, if I went to pick her up, I would have to pick her up around the corner.
Oh, yeah.
All the time around the corner.
Yeah, it was always...
I drop you off around the corner.
Yes, oh my gosh. I forgot how much thinking and stress.
I just feel like a lot of it could have been avoided if we were just like, well, it wasn't up to me. It was up to you.
Yes. He was extremely patient, and I know that you disagreed with how I approached this. I don't know if you really know the extent of what I went through, though, because this has been every relationship that I've been through. Every relationship that I had, my parents were disapproving and judgmental and extremely protective, and it was like that with my sister as well. So for us, it felt like a hopeless situation. They always see us as very young and that we don't know how to make good decisions. Broke up briefly, and then when we got back together, I just didn't tell my parents that we got back together. That was when I decided to go to the guidance counselor in school at that time, and like that's when I started actively pursuing therapy, and it just it just felt like I started questioning myself. You know, I was like, is it because I'm making bad choices? Is it because I'm just not choosing the right person? And I just felt like maybe I'm incapable of being in a good relationship because I don't know what I'm doing. Reflected onto the relationship because I started,
$1.18.
Yeah. It reflected onto the relationship because I started doubting Stefan and like nitpicking. And every little problem that would come up, I would just kind of exacerbate. And it was like nothing he could do would make it right. And then on top of that, us being young and not really understanding each other and not knowing how to deal with each other kind of blew up in our faces. I think it was very hard, especially because Stefan was the strongest person I had ever felt anything towards. So this meant so much more to me.
That was so strong.
Definitely going to therapy really helped. Because I was like, is love even real? Am I just stupid? When I got into university, I continued therapy with the free therapist in school because I held on to the hope that maybe my parents would come around. That was really difficult.
You held on. I held on the hardest.
Yeah, he never stopped believing. He was like, oh, they'll like me.
One day, they'll meet me and it'll be fine.
And then eventually, partway through our relationship, I was finally able to let go and completely accept the fact that my parents will never accept the relationship. And maybe it was something that I chose to convince myself to be able to cope with what was going on. But it really helped for me. Once I got to that point, it gave me a lot of peace, and I was able to get through my relationship and focus on my relationship with Stefan and not about what other people thought. Most important to me was also that my friends were validating my relationship. So like if everybody in my life was like, no, you shouldn't be with him, then I think I would definitely take that into consideration. But then everybody else was very happy and they really liked Stefan. I felt there was no reason to dump him. I felt there was no reason to question the relationship. That's a better way of saying it. Before the breakup, I got into a lot of arguments with my parents and trying to figure out, why don't you like him? And I did that a lot. I was like, why don't you like him? They never really had a reason why. Mom legitimately referenced him as garbage at one point. When we broke up and got back together, that's when I decided, like, there's no point telling my parents, you know, I don't want to go through all that drama again. And so, of course, throughout the whole thing, my parents obviously knew that something was going on. Like, they're not stupid. Second attempt at dating, it was a lot better for the both of us. I feel like we both matured, and I'm also hiding it from my parents. I've also accepted the fact that my parents will never accept the relationship, but there was still a lot of residual effects. And I don't mean to blame it on my parents, because I'm an adult now, you know, like I can process these things myself, but it definitely affected how I approach relationships. I think a huge problem with me is that even to this day, I question the legitimacy of my relationships, feeling like my decision making is that I have poor decision making and that I don't know how to really be in a relationship. I think my biggest fear is to end up in an unhappy relationship and stuck in an unhappy relationship, so I always try to find a way out. I'm always trying to find a
foot out the door syndrome.
Yeah, it's called foot out the door syndrome. And it's funny because we've been together for so long, but this is just the stuff that happens behind the scenes that you don't know, that like I'm always trying to find reasons to escape and run away. For the most part, like whatever relationship your parents have is the one that you assume you will have. You'd come to the realization that their relationship was not all it's cracked up to be. Well, I didn't want my relationship to be like what I saw. And I think a big problem is that most of the people, the adults in my circle, had failed relationships or masked failed relationships where they're just putting up a front. When I graduated university, I was like, okay, I need to be mature and step up and this is when I'm going to tell my parents. This was the reaction. I was with my sister. I needed my sister. I was like, you have to be there to be my buffer, please. My dad didn't say a word, not a single word. And my mom's reaction was,
I know.
Yeah, she was like, well, I know, but you're an adult now, so I can't say anything about it. And that was like the most acceptance that I had gotten in a while, ever, out of my parents, of a relationship. Kind of a bittersweet feeling.
Something.
Yeah, it was something. It doesn't sound like something, but it is something. From there, I didn't expect anything to improve. I was still very convinced that nothing would happen.
It's not quite acceptance, but it's not forbidding.
Yeah.
Which is something.
It was a breath of relief.
Yeah.
A huge
they
weight
know
off.
about it. They know about it, and they're not going to do anything about it.
Yes. Which is a huge weight off my shoulder to finally be able to be like, because still living at home with my parents, they're going to be like, where are you going? Who are you going with? What time will you be back?
Yeah.
And then now I'm like, I'm going out with Stefan. To the point where they stopped asking who I was going out with. I don't even know what happened, but now it's kind of like my mom treats it like she's always been okay with it. And I'm okay with that. Sometimes we tease her and say like, oh, you weren't that accepting of it, and then she just pretends. She's like, well, I had to make sure, you know, that you were focusing on school and stuff, and she would say stuff like that. Like there was never any drama.
We go out for dim sum.
Yeah.
I could have held a huge grudge.
Yes.
I should hate them back for 10 years.
Not should, but if I were Stefan, I would have also held something against them. I would have resented the treatment that I received. I would have been like, oh yeah, you hate me for no reason? Well then I hate you for no reason. Like, I'd be vindictive about it.
Now I even talk to your dad.
Now my dad
smiles at me.
Will make eye contact.
We've sat in the same car.
Yes, we've sat in the same car. I think Stefan's been left alone in the room with him for like 2 minutes.
Made small talk.
Yeah. At the end of the day, for both my parents, these are their daughters, you know, like, we're their precious little angels that they just can't like, don't want to let go of. It's crazy how far things have come from years and years ago, and I really don't think that if I did this sooner, it would have any effect. Asian parents have this dichotomy of, when are you gonna get married? Like they talked to me like, oh, when you get your own family one day, when you get married one day, which means that yes, they did in the future hope that I would have that, but then once the opportunity presents itself and that shock of, oh my god, my child is growing up and like maybe they're going to develop a life outside of being with me, it just shakes them to the core, to the point where they don't want that change. With your parents, it's like, oh, you have a girlfriend, let's meet. For my parents, it's like, let's not meet until you get engaged.
What does a ring change in this scenario of parents meeting?
There's significance to it. And like, to us, there's no significance in getting married, right?
Yeah.
But to my parents, it's like, when I was telling my parents, like, oh, I feel like we're just about ready to start thinking about marriage. My dad was like, think it's a whole other beast for him to tackle. This is finally making, to my parents, it's a lifelong commitment, right? Right now, there's still a way out. But that's like a whole other video. Marriage. Why aren't we married yet? That's a good question for the next video. I do have some resentment towards my parents for the way that they handled the situation, but I also can't blame them because of, especially going back to Hong Kong this year and seeing how my family is, my parents have come a long way. Yes, things could have been better, but they're human at the end of the day. And we weren't faultless either. The way that we handled things, sneaking around isn't the best way to go.
It's more so, yes, they hate boyfriends, but they don't actually hate the person.
Yes. I think this is very pessimistic to say, and I know this, and you're going to roll your eyes, but for people that are going through the same thing where you don't think that your parents will accept your relationship, it's not worth the fight. It's not worth trying to convince them to like the person. You can't control how they feel. You can't control how they're gonna act. So at the end of the day, I feel like just fuck it. Focus on your relationship. Don't worry about what other people say. If everybody's saying something, I think it is reasonable to take into consideration because love is blind. Just think of it as they're never going to accept you or your relationship, and make peace with it. That's my advice, which is maybe not your advice.
I don't think it's right that you hide it from them and not give them the opportunity to meet, you know?
Yeah. So he would have approached things differently. I really appreciate that you've been so patient through this.
10 years of patience.
And that you handled it very maturely, and that you did not hate my parents for hating you. I think that takes a lot of open-mindedness, because I would have been pissed. I was pissed, but if I was the receiving end of it. That's it for us. If you guys have any questions, or if you want to share your own story, I'd love to hear, because I felt like we felt very alone. And if you have any questions, let us know about our relationship, about our hot topics. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe and press the like button, and you can find us on Instagram at Letitia-a. See you guys next time.